This is something interesting. We have a Bluetooth adapter going to torque, and he has torque on his radio, which means he doesn't need a scanner. You can actually scan and clear codes and do bidirectional controls right through this radio. So we're going to go up to the mountain. This vehicle's getting picked up in a couple of days, and we have to do our test drive, and I'll try to show you some of the new features. So this vehicle has a 430 horsepower LS3, which is an extremely drivable engine. There is no rump. As you can see, it idles at about 600 RPM, dead smooth. In fact, this engine runs about as docile as the original engine. Your wife can easily drive this to the grocery store and be comfortable with it, yet it still has about 430 to 450 horsepower. We got a 6L80 in this Jeep, and we do support bump shift right through the factory controller. This has an Atlas 2 transfer case. As far as the Atlas 2 goes, if you have the need for it, front wheel drive for the snow, two-wheel drive low for going switchback trails, up switchback trails, it's a good deal. If you don't have a need for it, the 241J works great. All the steering wheel controls are functional. Radio controls, cruise control, digital information center, phone. Now we have and can support tap shift on the steering wheel. We've done it, but I really don't like it because as this wheel is spinning around off-road, you lose your orientation, which way is up. So I recommend staying with either the bump shifter or a thumb shifter on the shifter, or our toggle switch, which I think works great. It's difficult to describe how smooth and docile these engines drive. With our new cooling system, heavy-duty cooling system, this Jeep is running cool as a cucumber. In fact, it's been running for about 10 minutes and we're not even on the thermostat yet. We're running our all-aluminum heavy-duty dual-pass high-efficiency radiator with the Pentastar fan, and we are controlling the Pentastar fan properly. We're not leaving it running high, or we're not even using the Chrysler computer to drive it. It's the TIPM that controls the fan based on various inputs from the ECM, TCM, shift lever position sensor, park neutral safety. Goes through a lot of different modules, and it can get confusing for the fan. So you might see it do odd things like run at full speed when the engine's cold, or slow down as the engine gets hot. So we're running this off the GM side. It's much more reliable and easily tunable. This Jeep does not have automatic air conditioning, and you can tell by looking at the right knob. If the very left position said auto, and over on the left side the blower motor knob said auto, then you have automatic air. We support both automatic air and manual air. The Pentastar JKs and the 2011 JK use a CAN module for the high vac control rather than the early JKs, which used cable-driven controls. We are now using servo motors and a blend door, which it complicates things a little bit, but we've been supporting it for a while. When you're in the automatic mode, you basically select the temperature, put the fan blower in auto, and then it will use that as the interior temperature goal, and then control the compressor and the fan speed accordingly. So we've been supporting that for a while, as well as the other Pentastar JK functions. And you can see getting on the freeway here, even going uphill, is just effortless. I'm just touching the throttle. We're going to get an upshift. This Jeep is on 40s. off-road testing. That's going to include putting it in 4-wheel drive high and 4-wheel drive low, making sure the ESP functions turn on and off as they should. Go down some caliche trails to shake it up, make sure that nothing falls off, doesn't run hot. I can tell you how many times I've been on this road going west up to the mountain in a V6, even in a Pentastar, and the motors just scream. It's so nice to be able to cruise at 2,000 RPM or less. And that's what the V8 is going to do for you. Unlike a supercharger, turbocharger, you can run these tall gears and cruise comfortably on the highway. Lower noise, lower vibration. You have plenty of passing power. Just touch the throttle and you accelerate out. This Jeep actually drives really good. I'm not sure what suspension he has on it, but that's something very important that you must consider. The last Jeep we did, the geometry was off big time. He had his track bar and his drag link about 4 or 5 inches separated. You hit a bump in that thing and it wanted to change lanes. So we ended up having to redo the geometry on the front suspension after the swap was done. And we do that quite a bit, actually. Now you'll notice as we're hitting 70 miles an hour, going up a hill, a little bit of headwind, we're still holding 6th gear in the 6.2, even passing. One of the things about the Gen 4 LS series engines is the 6L80 transmission is programmed to keep the engine in the optimal operating range at all times. So if you give it a little bit of throttle to pass somebody, the smaller engines will downshift, and it can be annoying, and we do get complaints about it. But that's how they get the engine in its power band and keep it the most efficient. The Gen 5 motors have pretty much changed that. The Gen 5 motors now leave the engine at the RPM that you're at and then phase the cam to bring up the cylinder pressure. In addition, you have direct injection and high compression, so you have more torque available. So the Gen 5 engines we're finding do not downshift. They'll hold the gear longer, which will probably make a lot of people happy. Personally, I don't really mind the downshift, especially in the 6.2 because it's so minimal. Like right now I'm in 6th gear cruising at the top of this hill, and if I was in a Pentastar I'd probably be in 3rd or 4th, shifting between the two. So it doesn't bother me very much. Alright, we'll come back when we get onto the mountain. Alright, so we're at the top of the mountain. You can see we're at 186 degrees. We still haven't reached the thermostat with this new heavy-duty cooling system. I wanted to talk a little bit about the new installs. I say we've come a long way, and the kit that's been installed on this Jeep is completely different but functionally the same as our early kits. This is a factory stock GM engine harness. The only mods we've done to it is add our power distribution center and a couple of connectors. There are no redundant sensors on this Jeep. Coolant temp, oil pressure, crank sensor. There's only one set of sensors, and they're all running right through the GM system. We run a simple bridge between the GM system and the Chrysler system. It's a non-critical bridge, which means you can remove it and you're still driving. Now, while I'm driving here, let's turn on our cruise. The newer Jeeps have a different symbol for cruise. Okay, we're in cruise control right now. Your light on the dash, everything is functional, just like it was before. Check engine light. These controls work exactly the same. And it's all done with no redundant sensors. Very, very few wires were non-invasive. The interface is a simple bridge that allows the two systems to bidirectionally communicate. Our new MoTech module has the ability to interface analog, digital, CAN, and serial data, so we can most efficiently have the two systems talk to each other based on whichever communication we choose. Now, some things you want to keep pure, like the GM engine performance. We do not want to modify that at all. We do not want to run it inside of a Chrysler operating system or off of a Chrysler computer. Remember, we have to keep emissions compliance here. We have to run stock OE US EPA certified production tunes. The GM system must remain pure with all of its hardware. We could use the Jeep pedal to run the GM engine, but we don't. One, for liability, and two, it's required. We do use fuel level data. Fuel level data can be used when you fill up your tank to reset the adaptives. Fuel level data is used to set evap monitors and has other functions inside the operating system. So when I say pure, we try to keep these vehicles exactly the way the manufacturer intended them to run. We can do custom tuning, like if you were to get a 5.3 or a 6.0 and put a cam in it, but I do not recommend it. If you bought a 5.3 and put a cam in it, you'd have essentially the power of a 6.0. So why not just buy the 6.0? It would cost you less and you have better drivability. If you have a heavy JK, go with a larger motor. The heavier the JK, the larger the displacement helps. Larger engines have efficiencies due to the inherent torque in moving weight over the lower engines. The smaller engines have to work harder to move the weight, and that can actually lead to less economy. So a Pentastar in a 7,000 pound JK most likely will not get as good of mileage as a 6.2. The Gen 5s are a whole different level because of the technology in the Gen 5s. They're changing the game. They're changing the basis of how these engines operate. And we'll talk about that later. But as far as an LS3 goes, it's a relatively high compression engine. It's not direct injection. It's not variable valve timing. Something you must understand about the VVT motors in the Gen 4s is GM lowered the compression ratios in the VVT motors. That's because when the cam is phased in the advanced position, cylinder pressures get higher. Now remember, they only have control of the cam in two positions, parked and open. So they're not really taking advantage of the entire power band. So they put the cam where they want it, and then they use the transmission to get the engine RPM where they want it. You might notice with the 6-liter engines, you have two unique power bands. One is right off idle, pulls hard. About 3,000 RPM it starts to flatten out. At about 3,500 or 4,000 RPM, the cam phases and you get a burst of power again. With continuous VVT, you don't get that. You get a smooth power delivery all the way through. By the way, guys, if you come out here to Red Rock, be careful. They lowered the speed limit to 50 miles an hour, and the Rangers are out here enforcing that 50 miles an hour. So go easy out here. Getting back to the LS3, it's a high compression non-VVT engine. It can get reasonable gas mileage in a heavy JK if you drive it reasonably. That means if you were to drive it the same as you drove your 3.8. Now the 3.8 or the 3.6 can struggle going up some of these grades. When I say struggle with a Pentastar, I mean it revs up. When it revs up, it goes into performance enrichment. When it goes into performance enrichment, it's using more fuel. It's running at a richer air-fuel ratio. The 6.2 won't go into performance enrichment. It won't rev up. It'll stay at low RPM in closed loop, which is stoichiometric. That means you can get better economy with a 6.2 than you might with a 3.6. Now, if you drive the 6.2 20% faster, you're going to get less mileage. But if you drive the 6.2 the same, you're going to get better mileage, in my opinion. At least that's been our experience. And look at that, we got an airplane up here. So the LS3 is an excellent engine. Value for dollar in a new crate engine, I don't think it can be beat. You can purchase these engines for about $6,000. They come with a 3-year, 100,000 mile manufacturer warranty that covers the parts only. And they're easily tunable to 450 to 460 horsepower and still have the docile drivability of a stock 3.6 or 3.8. As far as the Gen 4 engine goes, this is probably one of my favorite. I really like the 6.0 engine. Actually, in some cases, I like the 6.0 engine better than the LS3. And that would be where you have an Expedition Jeep that must run on regular gas, does a lot of miles off-road, where having an iron block that is tolerant to the environment, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whether you run it out of coolant, run low on oil. All these LS engines have oil protection modes, hot protection modes, but the 6.0 is pretty much as bulletproof as you can get of an engine. Puts out about the same power as a 5.7 VVT Hemi, idles 450 to 500 RPM, has a 200,000 to 300,000 mile lifespan, and is a very low cost engine to get into. You can pick up 6.0s for $2,000 to $2,500 with low miles, and to get that kind of mileage and performance, it really is a bargain. Compared to the Hemis, there's a lot of LSs out in wrecking yards, and they come in a lot of varieties. 4.8, 5.3, 6.0, 6.2. There's truck 6.2s, car 6.2s. There's truck 6.0s and car 6.0s. One benefit of these LS engines is interchangeability. GM is very reliant on interchangeability. So if you buy a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0 or a 6.2, pretty much the accessory drive, the water pump, all the components are going to be interchangeable and available anywhere in the world. And we have customers in other countries that have issues getting parts for superchargers or Hemis, but with an LS, the parts are always going to be available. And we are supporting the factory GM accessory drive now, so virtually all the parts in the powertrain are available at your local dealership. So we'll come back in a little while when I get on the trail and talk about some of the other functions. Alright, so here we are, off-road, driving over some caliche roads, which really shakes you up. This is a really tight JK. We're gonna put this Atlas in 4-wheel drive low here soon. These Atlases can be tight at the beginning. You really gotta loosen them up before they shift smoothly. We got a lot of these caliche trails down here in Vegas. I personally don't like it, but it's a good way to test a vehicle. If something's going to go wrong, it usually does. We've very much simplified the wiring in this install. No redundant sensors, pure operating systems with factory wiring, virtually plug and play. I think the guys had the body on this one in about 15 minutes. That's the backside of Red Rock. Alright. We're going to go into 4-wheel drive low here. Alright. We are now in 4-wheel drive low. You can see our warning lights, ESP, ESC off, came up. If you got a 4-to-1 transfer case, with an LS, you might want to invest in some big brakes. We can support different shift patterns in four-wheel drive low, but I highly recommend you just stay with a stock pattern. It works really well. Alright, so we've been out here for about half an hour crawling. It's warmed up a little bit. Engine's still running on the thermostat. Tell you got a lot of torque in four-wheel drive low. Going down this hill, I can feel the wheels compression braking.